Please be seated. Call this meeting of council to order and ask if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, first agenda item is a presentation by Alison Jackson, Treasurer, Friends of Waterloo Regional Museum. And there's a check presentation. Welcome, Alison.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, Regional Councillors, my name is Alison Jackson and I've been a volunteer at Adjourn for over 40 years. I'm here today on behalf of the Friends of the Kensealing Waterloo Region Museum. Over the years, the Friends of the Museum have been committed to supporting the museum in Doon Heritage Village in many ways. We volunteer in the gardens, behind the scenes, in the village, and we raise money to help with a number of projects at the site. Each year, costumes are required for new staff and volunteers, as well as replacements for costumes which have been well worn and can't be repaired. We know this is an ongoing project which needs continuous funding. The Friends are very committed to Doon, and we hope that this donation of $5,000 towards costumes at the village will help in a small way this year. We are very proud and happy that we have our wonderful museum, which showcases the history of our region and the people who came to live here. The programs at the museum are for all ages, children as well as adults. And these programs interpret customs and traditions of our region to our local residents as well as visitors. One of the programs this week is the Halloween Children's Evening, and we are giving you $500 towards the cost to help the costs of that program, and we wish you every success. So on behalf of the Friends, I want to thank you for your unwavering commitment to the Waterloo Region Museum and to Doon Heritage Village. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alison. I have to say, I came to your AGM this past year, and it was wonderful to see not only the commitment, but the longevity of the commitment. And it's not very often that we have a volunteer group that not only animates one of our facilities like the Kensealing Waterloo Regional Museum, but you actually donate to it as well. So thank you very much on behalf of council and the rest of the region.
Thank you.
I see some other familiar faces in the audience of the Friends of the Kensealing Waterloo Regional Museum, so thank you for being here as well. So we have a registered delegation, Jim, Stewart and Riani DeWitt, co-chairs of Waterloo Regional Health Coalition. Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Redmond, and thank you to the councillors for this opportunity to speak to you tonight. I'm alone. Riani could make it. She's a little under the weather. My name is Jim Stewart. Again, I'm with the Waterloo Region Health Coalition. I'm here to speak to you about the changes in the local delivery of healthcare services. I prepared some speakers notes that I've provided to you electronically. So in the interest of some time, I'll just briefly go through some of the highlights of those notes, and I'd request that you take a couple of moments to review them at your leisure. I also have a very brief presentation, and I'll start right now. Okay, so this is the agenda I'd like to sort of present tonight. As I mentioned, I have provided you with some prepared remarks, but just to touch on those highlights, I'd like to address the planned provincial cuts and closures of public health care services. These changes will lead to the province offloading more of the cost of healthcare services onto every municipality in Ontario, including our municipalities and townships. This also means cuts to services, for which the evidence is overwhelming that the capacity is already far short of population needs. The cuts and closures are unnecessary. They will lead to new costs, they will take money away from care, and will put the quality and accessibility of public health care service at risk. We are asking that municipalities across the province to pass a motion that calls upon the Ontario government to halt the closures, mergers, and cuts to local healthcare services that our communities have spent almost a century or more building. For instance, public health units. I know that the council, the Regional Waterloo Council, understands very well the vital health promotion and disease prevention functions that the public health unit provides. It's critical that these services remain local because of the local demographics, and the needs are unique. Local governance means public health units have the flexibility to address the specific and unique demographic, socioeconomic, environmental, and cultural needs of their communities, such as ours. And we know that the Ford administration is proposing to cut provincial funding to public health by 27%, or almost $200 million, to close 25 of the 35 existing local public health units. To go on, with respect to ambulance and paramedical services, the province is also planning to close 49 of 59 local paramedic units and 12 of 22 local dispatch centres. The Ontario Paramedics Association has put out an official response expressing their disappointment and grave concern regarding these plans. The centralization of local paramedic units will mean longer travel distances, longer wait times, centralized triage, and centralization of resources over time. We're going to see many more code zeros with respect to ambulance services. And furthermore, this centralizing of dispatch centres moves them further away from local communities, specifically our townships, and may lead to a miscommunication regarding the directions taken by ambulance and dispatchers who have no familiarity with the giant territory which would be required to dispatch. And in case anybody is not aware of it, what the government of Ontario is proposing to do is to merge our Waterloo Regional Public Health Unit into a mega public health unit, along with the regions of Halton, the regions of Peel, and the regions of Wellington, with a catchment area of 2.94 million people, larger than the city of Toronto itself. So it'll be hundreds of kilometers away, 100 kilometers at least away from us, and it's very unlikely that when somebody says, a child says to 911 that I'm in the house past the Walmart, or something like that, that they'll understand precisely how to get there and deliver services. We also know that previous large-scale restructuring in Ontario undertaken by the Mike Harris government involved province-wide hospital restructuring, cost $3.9 billion to save $800 million. I'll say that again, to save $800 million, $3.9 billion were spent, and we were never able to recoup those dollars and apply them to patient services. With respect to long-term care, there's a proposal for $34 million going to be cut, and that's really the two special funds for long-term care that will directly affect this region: High Wage Transition Fund and the Structural Compliance Fund. This cancellation will require either increases in local municipal funding and/or adverse effects on the quality and quantity of care provided in these municipal homes. And finally, local public hospitals. We know that funding for local public hospitals budgets is set at less than the rate of inflation, let alone population growth and aging. This means that real dollar cuts to operational funding means service levels will not keep up with population needs. The Ontario Health Coalition has pulled together the government data on hospital capacity and has found the following: by every reasonable measure, Ontario funds its public hospitals at the very lowest rate in Canada, per capita, as a proportional provincial GDP. And just to give you an example of that, in 1965, the Freeport Hospital and the KW General Hospital at the time had 800 beds. Today, the Freeport Hospital and the Grand River Hospital combined have only 320 beds, despite the tremendous growth in our population. So just back to the PowerPoint, we are asking the council to consider this resolution. I've presented this resolution as part of the speaker's notes for your consideration. And specifically, we'd like to also provide you with some information that there's a number of municipalities across the province of Ontario that are very interested in supporting this type of resolution, including the City of Toronto, where it was passed on October 25th. We have a request for the Regional Council, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But before I get there, I just wanted to let you know that all of the clauses in this particular resolution have been well referenced. And I'd like to just draw your attention to clauses number 3 and clauses number 4, where we're really talking about that enormous cost to save very little money and the impact on the level of services that we will be seeing in the near future. I know I'm running out of time. I'll move along very quickly.
Good. Yeah, you're a little bit over.
Sorry. So finally, and this really is the final, is that we are requesting that council considers this resolution respectfully, maybe present it as a motion for council to take a look at and consider in depth, and then potentially vote on that motion so that we can ensure that we can then, as a council and as representatives of all of the community members in our region, ask the Government of Ontario to halt these ill-founded, misguided, and completely undocumented changes in our local delivery of healthcare. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. I have a question. Councillor Clark.
Actually, not so much a question. I do want to thank you for the presentation and the work that's gone into the resolution. I think you probably know that this is a matter that is of concern to council. We've certainly expressed that in many ways. I was actually going to propose that we refer this to staff to come back to next council with to give them a chance to review it.
I believe that would be acceptable. I have Councillor McGarry.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and I was interested in the way you framed some of the facts that you've been referencing regarding the restructuring under the Mike Harris years in government. I just had a quick question. I know that at some point, if I follow the link, I'll get the answer, but wondering if you could just let me know that in order to save the $800 million, $3.9 billion was actually spent. Can you just quickly identify what those $3.9 billion represented?
Yes, it was a variety of very expensive propositions around merging and amalgamating all of the 50 hospitals that were targeted at the time from 95 to 99. And that amalgamation and mergers were incredibly expensive. It included things like completely revamping the technology systems in different hospitals to bring them together to integrate those systems. As you know, some of the electronic health record systems in hospitals are enormously expensive. We just have to look down the street to see what's costing Grand River Hospital to put in an electronic health record. We're talking about changing all of the communication protocols. We're talking about hiring and firing new staff members as these mergers and amalgamations took place. And we're also talking about hospitals that are incredibly large organizations with many, in some cases across the province, many thousands of people employed in those centers. And anybody who's ever just tried to live through a corporate merger understood the length of time that the training, the restructuring, the relocation, the rebuilding, the closing down of some units and starting up some other place took, the rebranding, the communication protocols, all of the consultants that went into it. That's where that $3.9 billion was spent. Not on patient care, not on increasing any level of delivery of health care, not on reducing hallway medicine.
Thank you very much for the clarification.
Thank you for the question.
Councillor Harris.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for your presentation. Just two quick questions. One, who makes up the Ontario Health Coalition? What bodies locally make that up?
Okay. There's a national organization called the Canadian Health Coalition, and the Canadian Health Coalition has provincial organizations across in every province. And within the Ontario Health Coalition, it's a grassroots organization. I actually prepared a slight identification of who we are in the briefing notes, but I'll just read that off to you right now. So we are a grassroots organization of more than 500,000 members across Ontario. We are nonpartisan. We do not tell people how to vote or endorse any political party. Our mandate is to protect and improve our public health care system for all, and we advocate and protect services as a public nonprofit, and to protect local accessibility of services and the principles that underline our public health care system in Canada. Those principles are compassion and equity. So it's nonpartisan, grassroots, everyday Ontarians like myself.
And secondly, who funds the organization?
We are self-funding. We don't take any. We don't provide any sort of receipts as like a political party would. So it's grassroots. We ask for support from anybody who's willing to stand up and support public health care across the province.
All right, thanks.
Councillor Kiefer.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Just a quick question. Have you made this proposal or presentation to the members of provincial government representatives in the area, or no?
Well, as it turns out, we have been trying to meet with the MPPs of the Conservatives since February, with very little luck. We've been reduced to the point where we've been standing in front of their offices, those 3 Conservative members of provincial parliament, at what we call pop-up rallies, asking people to honk in support of a healthcare town hall so that we can actually try to add a lot of pressure to those Conservative members to have them come and address these questions of the changes that are occurring in public health care in Ontario, the most radical changes we've ever seen. And I haven't, of course, even touched upon Bill 74, which is the transfer of our public assets to ill-defined entities. And despite our repeated requests to have those entities identified as public not-for-profit entities, that has not occurred. So yes, we have both tried to reach the ruling party in Queen's Park. We've tried meeting with Conservative provincial members of Parliament routinely, and we've had very little uptake.
Thank you.
So you've really covered the waterfront about a lot of things. Some of them are jurisdiction and some of them are not. Just for your information, in August, Council passed a resolution directing me to write to Minister Elliott very much about these issues. I did that, and many of the people around this horseshoe were actually in attendance in Ottawa at the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and we had meetings with the Health Minister and other ministers to express some of these same concerns. You may already be aware, but Minister Elliott appointed Mr. Jim Pine as a special advisor, and I would suggest to you that that might be a venue where you might find a hearing and an audience for some of the concerns that you have. Hospitals are outside of our jurisdiction, paramedics, ambulances, and public health is very much our jurisdiction. So these are things we are concerned with. I don't know, Shuli, if you want to address this at all. A suggestion by Councillor Clark is that we refer it to staff. Is this something you could come back and comment on at a future date?
Yes, we can certainly review the proposed resolution. Council did pass a resolution specifically regarding the public health changes in August, as you mentioned, Chair. We also did pass a resolution regarding the transfer of dispatch services from the province to the region in January of this year, and that was accompanied as well by a letter from yourself to the minister. So we can certainly review and then bring back to council for your consideration.
So thank you very much, Dr. Wang. So am I sort of seeing that council would like some kind of status report to come back, but many of the actions that you were requesting as a delegation are things that regional council's already acted on?
Well, thank you. We're most grateful for those actions. We're somewhat aware of what steps you have already taken, and we are just basically coming now to try to ask you to add your very strong voice to that chorus of municipal voices right now that are embarking upon telling the Ford government precisely how they feel about the restructuring of our public health, local ambulance services, dispatch centers here in the region of Waterloo. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. We have two other delegations that registered as of today, so they will have 3 minutes each. And the first is Rory Farnan, Secretary, Citizens for Safe Groundwater. Welcome, Rory.
Thank you. And you've given me quite the task with 3 minutes, so I may be 1 minute behind, but I will do my absolute best for you. Madam Chair, Your Worships, Regional Councillors, my name is Rory Farnan. I am a resident of Wilmot and the Secretary of Citizens for Safe Groundwater. As staff has highlighted, there are vital, broad impacting conversations taking place regarding aggregate extraction that affects all levels of government. At a provincial level, the province is undertaking a review of two major policy pieces relating to the industry. The first being the Aggregate Act, the second being the Provincial Policy Statement, which I believe a report is about to be passed. This has created uncertainty for municipalities with the potential for loosened regulation and uploading of decision-making. The region has highlighted concerns surrounding plans to prohibit municipalities from setting limits of extraction. The region has also highlighted the need to strengthen the protection of its water resources. That includes both increased public engagement as well as broad measures to mitigate negative impacts. The region has concerns relating to rehabilitation. A recent review of licenses in Waterloo Region reported that only 20% of the land excavated for aggregate production has undergone rehabilitation. Quite shocking. This puts into risk permanent destruction of significant natural features and sensitive habitats. At a regional level, staff is undertaking an iron and manganese study of 3 key wells in Wilmot Township. These wells are an important part of the region's integrated urban water system. This study will determine the upgrade path for these wells. And it is also worth to note that Wilmot is home to the largest underground water recharge area, making it the largest source water protection area in the region. Honorable mention to my friends in Wellesley Township, as it too has vital amounts of underground aquifers. At a township level, there is growing citizen concern of how extraction is incorporated into our official plan. This includes the protection of source water recharge areas, wetlands, road safety, and impacts related to the human elements that exist in our communities. As staff collect data and council debate direction, future consideration will be needed. Our Director of Development Services, Mr. Okrafka, reported his concerns to council at Monday's township meeting. His report reinforces the concerns brought forth by the region. It uses the words loosen, backward, limitation, and unknown. But the most impactful words in his report, fast-tracking. The township is opposed to creating a process of fast-tracking decision-making. With all these factors and the high level of concern associated with them, are we in a position to make decisions relating to upcoming aggregate applications? How does council provide enough time to strategically establish policy-making decisions? One noteworthy suggestion, of which we presented to Wilmot Council, is the implementation of an interim control bylaw. Interim control bylaws can allow a temporary freeze on land use. The freeze can be imposed for 1 year with an option to extend for an additional year if required. There is no ability to appeal an interim control bylaw until after the first year of enactment. ICBLs are a low-risk, low-cost strategy to enable councils the time to consider its policy direction on future quarry locations while protecting council's local decision-making power. It is in our view that townships should enact this bylaw ASAP. With that said, tonight is a request to Regional Council, in collaboration with the townships, to work together to explore every viable option they have in their toolkit to protect their community. Aggregate extraction is not solely a township issue, but a regional issue. The issue of aggregate extraction is of far too great importance to remain silent on. I applaud the work of regional staff in the preparation of this report. Citizens for Safe Groundwater supports this report, and we are eager to collaborate in finding long-lasting solutions that protect our source water protection areas. Thank you.
That was right on time. Well done. I would have given you the extra minute.
Thank you.
I have Councillor Jowett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to advise you that a letter went out from GRCA Source Protection this week, speaking to some of your concerns. And we certainly have a meeting set up next week, again, dealing with some of these concerns. Appreciate your very comprehensive report to us.
Thank you.
And certainly we have Mayor Sue Foxton, who works very strongly in the aggregate industry, attempting to advocate on your concerns as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through the chair. So I'm the chair of TAPMO, which is the top aggregate producing municipalities of Ontario.
Yes, ma'am.
We have within our membership 77 municipalities. One thing you said 20% was rehabilitated and the others not. Our biggest problem is that grandfathering. Anything that was a pit before 1997 does not have to follow any regulations or hours of operation. I'm working diligently to change that. I want any grandfathered pit to have 2 to 3 years to empty that pit and rehabilitate it. Yeah. So that's one of the issues Tapmore is bringing forward. We just sent off a 10-page brief this afternoon to the ministry, and I provided information to regional council staff in regards to our brief as well to deal with this. And we actually showed where the aggregate had gone below the water table 10 times in two concessions. And as I said at the last council meeting, I had to drive down this road. It was a dirt road with quarries on either side of me, water on either side. It was a slippery, it was raining, it was a dirt road. And if I had gone in those quarries, no one would have ever found me. Mm-hmm. That cannot happen. We have to say that if you're going below the water table in pit number 1, the next one has to be 10 kilometers down the road. Mm-hmm. You cannot consecutively go below the water table. So we are diligently working on this. It's gone to the ministry. My executive is going to go and meet with the minister, and we're going to keep pushing.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Councillor McGarry.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Rory. And I do have to say, in the version that was passed of the Aggregate Resources Act in 2016, there was far more attention paid to what citizens had to say about it, consultation process. But it's interesting to note that cumulative effects can certainly alter the mind of that person that's signing the license, and the cumulative effects really does help to add weight when you're looking at issues such as source water protection, because one pit may be okay, but 2, 3, 4 in the same area may actually affect the water table and some of the environmental features around that. So you might have a look at that while you're doing letters yourself, because that's my next question. Have you taken forward your concerns to the area MPPs? We have the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry in the seat in Kitchener-Conestoga, mm-hmm. and have you forwarded some of those concerns to the ministry as well?
Yes, a few members of our group did have the opportunity to speak with Mr. Harris, and he was kind enough to spend some time to meet with us. And certainly we will be forwarding our submission along with the regions, and we'll be sure to CC the applicable local representatives.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farnham. I have no other questioners.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Regier, can I just ask you before I ask Councillor Galloway to bring forward item 2 from the Planning and Works, if the region's response, which is covered off by that item, covers some of the issues and the concerns that Mr. Farnham has raised?
Well, it doesn't specifically deal with the issue of the use of the interim control bylaw, but that's really a matter of planning law. So I think it's a bit of a separate concern. But certainly our objectives with the report and with the recommendation are to strengthen the role of local government in regulating aggregate extraction, and particularly with regard to the protection of groundwater resources and core environmental features. So the report is very much in line with the presentation that was made.
Thank you. Councillor Galloway, could I ask you to bring forward that item?
Yes, I will, Madam Chair. Item 2 on the Planning and Works Committee, we had a fulsome discussion on this matter, much in line with what the delegation has indicated. The motion is that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo forward our report dated October 22nd, 19 to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing as the region's response to the province's proposed changes to the provincial policy statement, ERO posting number 019027.
Thank you very much. I have a seconder. Moved by Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you. We have one more delegation, again registered today, so you will get 3 minutes. Lavern Forwell. Welcome.
Thank you. Chair Redmond, regional councillors. I just found out about this tonight, so I don't have anything specifically written down, but I just disagree with taking a power away from the township as far as aggregate. They're the people that are most familiar with the residents and the local area. And just to say about the rehabilitation, in '91, when I purchased my property on Whitmer Road, the expansion of the Lafarge pit was approved. And that was approved with the conditions that each segment of Phase 1, Phase 2, how it was to be rehabilitated, that they couldn't move on to Phase 2 until Phase 1 would be rehabilitated. That's, 28 years ago, and Phase 1 is sitting like a graveyard. They haven't planted a tree. They haven't done anything. They're now way on the far side, almost to Huron Road, which is another concession over. So what purpose are these big agreements that are brought to council and approved and then just rolled up and put aside? I went to Guelph and they said, oh, we don't have any jurisdiction on the rehabilitation. I said, well, who does? They said, well, maybe you should go see your council, your township. Well, that wasn't their job neither, obviously. So it just seems like nobody has the responsibility. The other thing was that the township give, for the approval of that extension of that Lafarge pit, was 7 agreements, recommendations that would be, had to be done in order to carry on that extension. I got this the other week says that no access be obtained from Huron Road or Township Road 6, which is now Whitmer Road, for the purpose of extracting gravel or transporting gravel. Well, a few years ago, we did have an approval of a small gravel pit, which turned out it didn't really go in front of anybody's house, but just across from the first person's house. This gravel pit is on the opposite side of the road, the same distance as this agreement was signed for, and now they want to let that gravel company come down that road also. This is a township road, and the gravel for that road was taken out of my farm by the person I bought it from with horses and wagons and spread on the road. And it was laid over nothing but topsoil. And when the township they did the study for the improvement of the road for that previous pit, I talked to them and they said, we get through the asphalt, the chip asphalt, and a little bit of gravel, and there is nothing but topsoil below that. And that's what we're running semi-trailers down that road. I don't think it's going to stand up. So then they say, well, the gravel company will build the new road. They did that just the other day on Sand Hill to avert traffic coming through New Dundee. Now it's going past somebody else's house to a provincial job up by Stratford. So who, is it taxpayers paying for that? Or does the provincial government pay for that road being rehabilitated so these semis can come down there? You know, the other thing is putting a gravel pit beside our properties. It's a known fact that we lose the value of our property because it's right up against my property by 25, maybe 30%. Now, the value of my property, that's like reaching in my pocket and taking hundreds of thousands of dollars out of my pocket. For a person who has run gravel companies for years, has more money than he knows what to do with. And I know that's not a factor because that's his right to do that. But he should have to compensate for stuff like that. Just like rehabilitating the road so he can run his trucks down, he should be refunding the people whose properties are being depreciated. So that just gives you something to think about, because as citizens on that road and on the road in Shingletown, and I think a lot of people would like a lot more say as to what happens to the value and the noise factor, and he's covered the water pretty much. We all agree on that. We all agree that we need gravel, but that pit is not the right place for it. There is water protection on one end, a great wetland with lots of wildlife, waterfowl. That's all going to be ruined, and it will ruin the water quality. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forwell. I didn't realize you were speaking on the same issue, or I would have waited to take the item on Public Works. I have a couple of people with questions. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. My questions are really for the delegation, just a comment, I suppose. So we talked about the Aggregate Resource Act at our council last night too, and I just wanted to pick up on something that the delegation said about pits remaining dormant and sitting and not being rehabilitated. And one thing we spent a lot of time talking about was sunset clauses. And sorry, Sue, I didn't get a chance to read your email that you sent yet. I saw it there, but I haven't gone through it. So hopefully that's something that TAPMO is looking at as well.
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you. All the issues you've raised are what we are addressing with the minister as well. In the new act, it says that LPACT will no longer deal with haul roads, so they can drive wherever they want, and you can ask them nicely by the municipality, but you have no jurisdiction. Now, as you're aware, or council's aware, I don't know if I've told you before or not, a double axle truck, which is a truck that picks up aggregate, is the equivalent to 12,000 cars going down the road. Now, when you consider that in North Dumfries, we're the third largest in Ontario, you can see 100 of those trucks over a half-hour period. So you can imagine the impact on our roads, as well as the dust and noise. We're attempting to deal with this. In our report, we sent to ALPAC stating that we want, and to the ministry, that we want ALPAC involved so that we still have some teeth to make this happen, to make it watch. When you talked about the rehabilitation of your pit, and they said phase one, they don't have to follow that. There's never been any push, and if they put it on the site plan, then the municipality can try and force it, but they do not have to follow it, and so you're finding a lot of pits are not following the plan where they take out phase one and they rebuild phase one and then go into two, and that's not happening in a lot of cases, and we're working on that as well. It's a big problem. The province wants to get aggregate out. Even before this government, when Premier Wynne was in, she told me that they had $9 billion worth of projects that all require aggregate. And it was essential that the aggregate get out quickly. But still, what's happening with this new legislation, what's happening to our province? What's going to happen to, and then I was going to ask Chair Redmond, we got the letter from the ministry yesterday in regards to the Crown land. And I think if we could all councils be sent those letters so that they're aware? A letter came through yesterday that the province has said that now you can go into the Crown land and chop down the trees. It doesn't have to be a lumbering company or anything else. So what's going to happen now to our forests? We have to be more vocal. We have to be louder. We have to push harder, because this is everything working on climate change. We're turning around because of the way we're doing business. Open for business does not mean the destruction of our province. We have to work harder.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. And yes, I can forward those letters to all of council if you haven't received them. And I hope you go away at least with the knowledge that we are trying to take as much action as we can to make these issues heard. Mr. Forwell, I'll give you the last word.
Yes, am I on the understanding that they can go on any road now?
There is no means to prevent it. The Act has not completely passed. They've allowed for consultation up till November 4th. So today we completed the brief from TAPMO, and I sent it out to 77 municipalities to forward to the province. So we're fighting these issues. But yes, they can. They can. See, the only problem being is you put a no truck route sign up. The only one that can enforce that no truck route is the police. The police don't have the time to come and enforce it. And the municipalities can't enforce it, so they ignore it because they know there's no one there to enforce it.
But you're talking semi-trailers, back feeders, running in front of a man's house that is from here to Chair Redmond's chair there.
Yeah,
That's not right.
I know it's not right. We have to work harder to correct it.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time to come in. So I would ask everyone to turn their attention to the minutes of the previous meetings. Closed Council of October, the Audit Committee, Community Services Administration and Finance, Planning Works and Closed Committee. And I would entertain motion moved by Councillor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Foxton. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? No opposed. That is carried. Communications, are there any questions arising from your communications package, which you would have all received electronically? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to go into the Committee of the Whole, moved by Councillor Kiefer, seconded by Councillor McGarry. All those in favor? That is carried. I would entertain a motion to move all of the finance reports, which are on page 2, 3 to halfway down page 4, moved by Councillor Nowak, seconded by Councillor Clark. Are there any questions, or would anybody like to take anything out? I see Councillor Galloway has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just trying to find it, but the last finance report has to do with snow plowing contract at the Ops Center and all the surrounding properties, the police and the lab and so on. And the value of this contract last year was half of what it is this year's tender, and the low tender is half of the second low tender. And so I know there's some explanations in the report as to what kind of circumstances have changed, but this does seem to be rather dramatic in terms of double the cost of last year and the second low being double of what the low is. So there's always a concern when you have a huge disparity between the low and the second, and we can all remember the kind of problems we had with snow clearing at GRT stops a couple of winters ago when we took the low tender, and of course that was a bit of a disaster. I suppose in terms of the public implications at the op center and those facilities, it's not so great to the public. It would be to the employees, of course, and for the efficiency of our operations. But and I don't know if Mr. Dyer can speak to this, or whether or not procurement could get back to me on what's happening here.
Mr. Dyer, would you like to address this?
Yes, thank you through you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure there's too much more I can offer other than what's in the report. This has been our experience on a number of snow plowing bids over the last little while. I would note that the recommendation, the award is for 1 year with an option to renew. I would say based on the price and the increase in the price over last year, that it's likely that we'll attempt to go out and test the market again, I think a lot earlier next year, so hopefully in the spring, in an attempt to get improved prices. But this is a theme we've seen across a number of tenders, and as I understand it, a theme experienced by a number of municipalities in Ontario.
Okay, thank you. That's good.
Does that suffice? Is that a sufficient answer, Councillor Galloway?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Seeing no other questions, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Next, we move to committee reports. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I move the approval of one community services motion with regard to the 2020 fees in the region's directly owned and operated childcare centres.
Can I have a seconder? Councillor Armstrong. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Councillor Jowett, Finance and Admin.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend the two as written. One is with regard to exemptions or repeal of exemptions, and the other is with some clarification around regional development charge exemption funding strategy as set out in the reports quoted. Thanks.
So moved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Nowak. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. It's like seeing a wave. The hands are going up, but not all at the same time. Councillor Galloway, would you like to deal with the planning and works recommendations?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are 6 recommendations. Number 2 we've already dispensed with. So I'll move the remaining 5 recommendations from the committee. And then from the closed session of last Tuesday, I'll move the property acquisition 1388 Highland Road West for the Highland Road project at a value of $1.71 million and $105,500 in disturbance damages.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Shantz. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Mr. Murray, do you have a report? No report? Under other business for the information package is the Public Consultation Center, number 2, Fischer-Hallman, Barringer Road improvements from Columbia West to Westmount Road, north of Waterloo. This is just for information. I would entertain a motion for the Committee of the Whole to rise and for Council to resume. Moved by Councillor McGarry, seconded by Councillor Kiefer. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. A motion to adopt proceedings of the Committee of the Whole, moved by Councillor Jowett, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? That too is unanimously carried. Any notices of motion? Seeing none, any unfinished business? Other business? I would entertain a motion to enact the bylaws first, second, and third readings, moved by Councillor McGarry, seconded by Councillor Foxton. All those in favor? That too is unanimous. I would now entertain a motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Harris, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Great, have a good evening.